problem in the United States right now is that vaccination rates are much higher in some parts of the country than in other parts of the country. And that's creating a situation like what we feared would happen globally, that the high-income countries would vaccinate, the low-income countries would be unvaccinated, and that divide will cause the pandemic to continue. And in the United States, there are big swaths of the country that have much lower vaccination rates. And ultimately, that could undermine the success of the other parts of the United States in terms of achieving relatively high vaccination rates at this point. So, I mean, as much as possible, this has to be a group effort. We got into this together, we're going to leave it together. And, as with everything else, in Korea, right? I mean, masking and distancing isn't going to work unless everyone's working together. Vaccination is the same. And everyone has to be vaccinated. You can't count on your neighbor being vaccinated to protect you.
Would you say that we're on schedule with the pace of the vaccination, or are we kind of like there's just a lot of real world problems that we have to deal with?
So I think, yes, you're right. There are real world problems. And one of the issues is supply. It's prove it, make it, use it. And we're having problems making enough vaccine. But this is the case whenever new technology is brought online. You're not going to be able to get enough of something in the beginning. I mean, look at iPhones. I mean, try to get an iPhone the day that it's offered. Whereas if you go 3 months later, you don't have to stand in line. And the same is true now for vaccines. Not to say that vaccines and iPhones are the same, but in this case, we're talking about manufacturing 16 billion doses of vaccine. And by comparison, a vaccine that has global use, like the flu vaccine, is made at between 400 and 500 million doses a year, not 16 billion doses a year. And that's going to be a real challenge because now a significantly greater amount of vaccine will make its way into the pipeline. And any delays could result in vaccine having to be destroyed. And so I think people remember that in Malawi burned 20,000 doses of AstraZeneca vaccine because of the expiration date.
That was actually going to be my next question, because a lot of these vaccines have expiration dates. And how long do they last, and why do they expire?
Typically, you get to a period of maybe 12 months or 24 months before the vaccines need to be considered outdated and destroyed. But that would be under normal circumstances where we have years to develop a vaccine. In this case, the vaccines were developed in 11 months. So we don't always have the ability to say that batches made in September of 2020, we know that they'll be good for 3 months, and then after, by March, we know that they'll be good through March and probably into June. And so the company's extending the use-by date continuously. For instance, some of the RNA manufacturers, like Pfizer, actually don't put an expiration date. There's a code there that you enter into your phone, and it'll give you the latest information on when the expiration date is. Now, that's not typical. This is something that's very unusual. Vaccine manufacturers usually are very careful about when vaccines expire. But because vaccine supply is so limiting, they don't want any doses to be wasted if they don't need to be wasted. And so they've come up with innovations like this. The US had 60 million doses of AstraZeneca vaccine already available, and that vaccine is being extended. It's really important for the companies to keep up with this because they know. I mean, they've seen the demand forecasts for these vaccines. They know how many countries want them, and for a vaccine to be wasted is really unconscionable.